welcome everybody. This is Football Talk, and I am your host, and we are going to do a Thursday night football preview, which is a huge game for the Seattle Seahawks to be able to keep pace not only with the Niners, but have any hopes of making it into the playoffs. So you have the 49ers coming into town. They are 9-4 versus Seattle's 7-6. And if Vegas is right and the Niners pull it off today, they sew up the NFC West division title, and that almost makes it, it's not impossible, but the odds are extraordinarily low for the Seahawks to be able to get into that wild card spot from there. So this game is huge. Obviously, the Niners already have a couple of game lead and have the early win over the Hawks when they beat them 27-7 early in the year. So this game not only matters in a huge way as far as potentially still being in the running to win the division, but also when you start looking at the wild card situation, you have the Giants, Commanders. That tie puts them both ahead of the Hawks. And then, of course, you have Detroit that is sneaking up behind them right now. And so as you start to look forward, this game is going to be really a deciding factor. Obviously, they do have KC next week as well. Excuse me. So it doesn't get easier for the Hawks from here out. But there's some things that are encouraging going into this game. Obviously, they're coming up against San Fran's number one defense. They're number one against scoring and in total defense. So getting through those guys is going to be no cakewalk, but Seattle does start to get some of their players back. Now, granted, they may not necessarily be 100%, but Kenneth Walker gets to come back. So hopefully they can get some of that running game going. And then, of course, he had limited practice, but is on the questionable able to play list, and that is Al Woods. So getting that nose tackle back could be huge for a team that has been getting absolutely gashed against the run. So when you look at, since he's been gone, and really what that defense has done over the last 4 weeks, their lowest rushing total was to Fournette 4 weeks ago, and that was 151 yards. The last time that they had a rusher under 150 or under 100 yards, but also under 150 yards was Saquon Barkley, and 5 weeks ago against the Giants. And so you're looking at a run defense that has been completely exploited, and any game that they've had less than 150 yards, they're 6-0. So if they can get Christian McCaffrey at least slowed down, he doesn't necessarily have to have a 50-yard day, but they need to slow him down. That Seattle offense is good enough to score points, but they need some time of possession back. The time of possession has been wildly in favor of the other team over the last 4 weeks, and obviously a lot of that is because they're giving up basically 200 plus yards a game on the ground, and it's hard to kind of stay in a game, especially time of possession wise, when you got teams that can run the ball at will. It's really hard to get any kind of rhythm going, especially with your offense. And Gino has had, he's shown up in these games where they've had 50 yards rushing and has played well. I mean, there's been a couple of turnovers here and there, but when the other team knows you have to pass and every down is a passing play, essentially, all of a sudden that secondary gets to play off and, much freer. So the windows that you're throwing through get a lot smaller. So were some of those interceptions bad decisions? Of course. Were some of them just a good defensive play? Absolutely. Because, again, if you're not afraid of the run, and that offensive line, despite not really having any injuries, really hasn't been able to open any holes, all of a sudden, it becomes much easier as a defensive back because that those guys up front are going to get home, and you don't have to respect the fact that there could be a run. It's also probably why some of his scramble plays have been so effective, because a lot of those defensive backs have been able to play off, which, essentially could have created a coverage sack. And, fortunately, Geno is athletic enough to be able to, move out of those situations. And, unfortunately, sometimes he's kind of his own worst enemy there. Like there was one that's a prime example. I wish I had the video of it. He sort of did a pinwheel and ended up being a big sack rather than just deciding to go and, getting through what looked to be a pretty sizable lane for him to scramble. Now, granted, that's me saying this on the couch, obviously not in the middle of the action on the field. So whether or not he saw it the same way I did, probably not. I have the advantage of I'm sitting here with food and a beer, and he has the helmet on and has to scramble for his life. So clearly there's a little easier decision-making that gets to happen on my end. But he's actually played exceptionally well considering the last 4 weeks. He's basically had to almost play hero ball because there's been no running game of any kind. And in a couple of those games, he was the, second leading rusher. So that doesn't exactly say good things as far as the way the running game has been going. But we got Kenneth Walker back this week. And so hopefully that will make the defense become a little bit more honest on the back end and should open up some throwing lanes for Geno. But then there's also some things on the 49ers side that could really affect the way the game goes. One of them is obviously Debo is out, got injured last game, and so he won't be a factor. Obviously, that will increase the emphasis on Christian McCaffrey having a big day. When it comes to the other receivers, I think the Seattle secondary is actually a better unit. And so, especially since you got Woolen, I know Diggs is coming back. And so that secondary unit is actually really solid for the Seahawks. And so I think matchup wise, that's probably the only spot on the field that they are better. But I think that secondary is probably better than the Niners receiving core currently. But at the same time, they've been able to run the ball. They have had really good protection. And so it's going to be interesting to see if they can kind of bottle up Christian McCaffrey a little bit. They also are coming in light some defensive players. So they have 2 linemen and 2 defensive backs that are out for this game. And then they have 1 more lineman and 1 more defensive back that are questionable for the game. So even if they're in, you have to wonder how effective they're going to be. They also have Purdy, who has an oblique rib injury. And so there's questions on whether or not he's actually going to get the start or if Josh Johnson is going to get the start. And, we haven't seen a lot out of Johnson, right? He's he's basically their 4th string quarterback at this point. He's been on, I think the stat was 14 different teams and really doesn't have a whole lot of meaningful game footage to look at. I actually didn't even realize he was still in the league. So I had to do a little research just to see what he's done. And I mean, essentially he's popped into a game here and there and, done like a pass or a victory formation and nothing really interesting to see. Now, granted, that can help and hurt, right? Because if there's no film, then you really don't know what to expect. So, if he's smart with the ball and accurate, then having no tape could actually, hurt a defense versus, somebody that just comes in and just isn't very good and they're 4th string for a reason. So those are some major components that are going to be key contributors to whether or not the Niners can get this done or not. I think that, coming into this game before I saw the finalized, as final as you ever get injury report, I had the Niners. I was with Vegas on this. I had the Niners winning this game, but with the Seahawks basically having nobody officially out. Now, whether or not they're going to be super effective, again, who knows? If they were injured all week, limited reps, like Bruce Irvin didn't practice all week. He's available for the game. I know that DK had some limited work, but is available for the game, isn't on the injury list at all. So hopefully that's good, and definitely going to need him against that, pretty suffocating San Francisco D. That defense is probably one of the better defenses that we've seen really in a decade almost. So really since the Legion of Boom broke up, this is probably one of the better defenses. Obviously, the Broncos had a good defense in there as well when they won the Super Bowl. But that being said, over the last decade, it's probably, a top 5 of the defenses that have been on the field. So it's definitely one that's going to be tough to go against, and having some of the players that have been out for the Hawks come back in, really important. It should be a good game, a fun watch. That being said, if Purdy comes in and executes the way that they did against Tampa Bay, it could get ugly. I think that that's probably not going to be the case, especially because there's some desperation in this game for the Seahawks, because you lose this game, not only are you done division-wise, but you are more or less done in the wild card. And I only say that because going up against KC, that is probably the most well-rounded team in the league at this point. Obviously, I understand the Eagles exist, but as far as the Eagles are concerned, in my mind, they haven't had the toughest schedule to go up against. Now, obviously, they don't make the schedule, so that's not on them. And maybe they would have beat the brakes off some of these better teams, and unfortunately, we're not going to know until the playoffs come around. But they did play well in their own division. Naturally, it's going to be good to watch that Eagles Dallas game that's coming up. But for this Thursday night game, it's going to be fun to listen to Richard Sherman as well, since he was on both teams, right? And he's going to be doing commentary for this matchup, and there's so much writing on this matchup. Should be a pretty entertaining listen. But I wanted to get a little bit of pregame in here. And so let me know what you think, which way you think you're going. I think it's going to be a Seattle win that is really close and keeping the playoff hopes alive. Now, granted, I am a Hawks fan, so some of that could be wishful thinking. But if the Seahawks drop it here, that is probably the end of the road as far as this season is concerned. So like, subscribe, let me know who you have for Thursday night football.